So it is a brand new year and it's time for us to go ahead and break down exactly which specific Mac you should go ahead and buy, whether it's a Mac Mini, MacBook Pro, or an iMac. Now, funny enough, Apple just made a new Mac as I'm making this video. They're making and re-releasing a Mac Mini and a MacBook Pro in the same body as before, but it is coming with those new M2 chips, which is really awesome. So I will say, if you want to pick up any Mac, I will leave links in the description. You can get from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, the first thing I want to kind of break down for you is that if you were to go ahead and go down this Mac, styling situation, you have to keep in mind that each specific Mac has their own type of way of going about things. So with the Mac Mini, it's kind of reaching a different demographic than maybe even an iMac, and so on and so forth. So the first thing I'm going to kind of break down for you is, do you travel a lot with your Mac? Do you actually go through and are you traveling a lot? Or do you like somewhat of a stationary Mac that you can actually go through and you're almost always at home, you're always in front of a monitor, and that's kind of it? If you're somebody who is actually almost always at home and you pretty much just use a Mac when you're at your house, you're almost always in a screen on a desk, you're very rarely ever lay back on your bed and use your Mac or anything like that. If you want something along those lines, I kind of do think that an iMac, especially the M1 iMac, is probably one of the best Macs that you can actually go ahead and buy. Now, the reason I say this is because not only do you just get everything all in one, but it actually can be a little cheaper than if you were to actually go and buy another Mac and buy a separate display with it as well. So in this case with the M1 iMac, but any iMac will kind of do, if you actually go ahead and buy this one, this is a 24-inch one, but they also make the 21.5-inch one, as well as the 27-inch one if you want to get an older one. And the reason why I like an iMac so much is because they kind of give you everything in one package. It's all powered with one power cord, which is cool. You don't have to have separate power cords, which can be an issue if you're buying a MacBook or a Mac Mini if you're connecting to a monitor. And you're also getting a very good monitor on the specific device as well. I mean, the display of this thing, I think this one is 4.5K, but it is probably one of the better displays I've seen. It's definitely not crazy amazing, but for the price tag at $12.99, and even cheaper in the used market, that is a pretty decent price to pay for an iMac. It's an all-in-one machine, it's fairly powerful, you can spec it out to 4 USB-C ports on the back, and overall, I'm pretty much a big fan of these iMacs for the price tag. Now, unfortunately, I do think that if you're somebody who has, already some sort of monitor, especially if it's USB-C, getting a Mac Mini or a MacBook, of that caliber would probably be a little bit of a better machine, especially with MacBooks, but we'll save that to the end. But the Mac Mini, I think these are very good Macs as well. I mean, these things, theoretically speaking, you can spec out now a little bit higher than those iMacs, which I think is really cool. You can spec it out with more memory as well than the iMacs, and you can actually spec it out with more storage as well than the iMacs as well. So I would say this is a very good device if you're not really constrained on a budget, but you're more so just kind of thinking about which specific, if you already have a mouse and keyboard, if you already have things like a monitor already set up and maybe some dongles here and there, then I do think a Mac Mini makes probably a little bit more sense for you. And the reason for that is because it is substantially cheaper than an iMac and a MacBook. The starting price of an M2 Mac Mini right now is $599. That is not that much money to go and spend on a Mac. It's still pricey, but compared to what you're getting, that is a very powerful chipset to have inside of that type of Mac. And personally for me, I think that is a very, very nice touch. The fact that Apple went ahead and made these Mac Minis as cheap as they are, I think is really cool now. Obviously, if you spec it out higher, it's going to cost more, but I think it's a nice little thing that Apple did. And I'm a big fan of how these Mac Minis have held up. Now this brings us to our MacBooks. Now, MacBooks are kind of all over the place. You can get all sorts of different MacBooks at all sorts of different price tags. So again, it's one of those things to kind of keep in mind. If you want to go ahead and buy something like a MacBook Pro, then obviously that's going to go ahead and pretty much be, at a higher level. It's going to cost more. If you get a MacBook Air, that's going to not cost as much. But the one thing that I do like about MacBooks is the portability factor. When you're actually traveling, and in my personal life, I used to have an iMac and a MacBook. That was kind of my ideal situation. And I would almost always use my MacBook when I'm in bed or if I'm traveling. But if I was at home, I would almost pretty much always use my iMac just because I thought it was more powerful. But ever since Apple made those M chipsets, their lineup has streamlined so much that it isn't really a power question anymore. It's really just, do you plan on using a monitor when you're at home, or do you plan on, using it separately, whatever the case is? So ever since the M1 MacBook Pro, I switched over and I've bought another monitor, And ever since then, I've been docking up my Mac to my monitor. I use it, closed down, which kind of sucks, especially when you have this 120Hz panel on these type of MacBook Pros, the M1 Pro models. But I do think I love that portability aspect. If I'm traveling, if I'm going to someone's house, if I'm going wherever, I love the fact that I can just pick up my MacBook and just move on and go wherever, and all of my information comes with me. And I think that is very important. I also have iCloud Drive set up to where a lot of my files are automatically synced up to my iCloud, bucket, basically my folder that already has I'm paying monthly for. And even at that point, there are still tons of times where I will forget to send myself a file if I'm going somewhere. And then during that time, I'm like, oh, I forgot I didn't even send myself this file. So I'll have to reschedule some things. And that can be kind of annoying. With a MacBook, you don't really have to do that. Everything just comes with you. And that is so beautiful. So in terms of that, I've kind of broke down each individual criteria for each one and why I love each one. The things that I hate the most, if I kind of break it down real quick, with the iMac, I don't really like the bezels around the iMac too much. I don't think it's a smart thing Apple did here. And I feel like with the bottom bezel, they could have done a little bit of a better job here. I also don't like how you can't upgrade your RAM anymore. I really like that about the previous iMacs. Unfortunately, with this one, you're kind of stuck with that, and you don't get, 4 USB-C ports on all the models. The cheapest model does only have 2 USB-C ports, which is kind of not the best deal. With the Mac Mini, there's really not too much to hate on this one because it's just such a cheap price tag. I think maybe the only thing I can think of possibly is more USB-C ports I would love to have, or maybe more upgradable parts. But even then, a Mac Mini I think sits in a really good spot. And again, I don't really think there's too much I would complain about in that standpoint. With the MacBooks, there's some things I can complain about. For one, again, no upgradability. That can be kind of a pain, but none of these really have any upgradable parts. I've had tons of issues with some of my Macs where previously I would have to it's almost every other week I have to reboot my machine. Not because of any bugs, but sometimes it just feels like my machine gets bogged down. The fans kick up a lot, the battery life gets really bad. Then I have to restart it, and that can sometimes be kind of a pain. One other thing that has happened a few times personally for me is actually with my Macs actually shutting down. So with my iMac, whenever there's a power outage, and it's not an Apple problem, it's just, a problem with electricity sometimes, the, random power outages can happen. Sometimes you unplug something, sometimes you unplug an extension cord, and it's plugged into your iMac or your Mac Mini, and sometimes the Mac can go ahead and shut down, and you can lose some of your data. Now, with modern systems, it's actually gotten really good, and you don't really have to worry about it too much. But that was another thing that kind of freaked me out sometimes. That's happened to me tons and tons of times. With my MacBooks, what's good is that it does actually have a built-in battery. So if for some reason I accidentally unplug the charger to my MacBook, well, it still has a built-in battery and it can just charge. And as long as I don't run out of battery, it's still going to have, basically saved all my data there, which is actually really cool. So that's another thing that I kind of do keep in mind, especially with my Macs. So if I were you, the ideal situation would probably be buying a MacBook and then just connecting it to a monitor when you're at home. I don't think there's a huge reason to have an iMac anymore, unless you pretty much are on a supreme budget and you already have maybe some accessories. But even then, if you are if you want a workstation at your work job or something, then I think an iMac might make a little bit more sense. But I just think nowadays having some sort of MacBook, especially with the power being so similar now, I just think buying a monitor and buying a MacBook probably is the best choice for a lot of people. So that pretty much covers it up. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.